Okay, we'll get cracking, everybody. Thanks so much for coming along today. Really appreciate having you along here for our second Real Learners webinar. That we're part of a series that we're getting going at the moment, and yeah, looking forward to bringing a new title and a new topic around, I guess, that exponential growth that I think that you can get through high quality learning in your business or your company. You know, we want to make sure that all of that's unpacked really neatly for you. So this is a series of webinars. The first one we ran a couple of months ago, and that one was all about, you know, learning being the I guess the last frontier of competitive advantage, and you know, unpacking for people that actually there's a lot of theorists out there who are saying now that learning sort of that last thing. You can have all the bells and whistles in the world, but having people immersed in a culture where they learn and where they actually learn to think at higher levels is what produces that prolific level of ideas in your business. And you have to be prolific around this stuff. You know, I love the stories around Prince, and a lot of people are talking about when Prince passed away, his genius as a songwriter and performer. But what a lot of people didn't know was that Prince actually set himself the task of writing 2 songs a day, which meant that he wasn't actually as brilliant as many people thought. He was just so prolific that some of what he produced had to be of incredibly high quality. And so what happens when you can get people learning at a crazy high level is that they start to get prolific and they produce multiple quality ideas. And I guess it's a little bit like a deck of cards, that if you produce 52 cards, if you pull enough out, that you'll eventually pull out some aces. And that's the intention behind that last webinar. So we're going to build upon that webinar today and talk about what are some of the very simple, very implementable things that you can do that will allow you to put people in that space where they think at a much higher level. And I guess what I would like to do today is to do a little bit of, first of all, I want to acknowledge the audience of the people that I've got here today, all of the people that have registered for the webinar today from the business and the business and the corporate sector. I did have a little bit of confusion last time. I think we had some people, because I still do a huge amount of work with the schools and the education system. Had some people who found themselves in the wrong webinar, unfortunately. But today I'm pretty confident in checking out the list that we've got people who have signed up who are from the right sector. So welcome aboard to all of you. My intention today is to move, I guess, from the broad through to some very specific and very implementable actions. So what I'm trying to, I guess, build with you is a very strong why. Learning differently is worth your time and your thought, and then I want to give you some ways that you can get started with it straight away. And I guess to do that, in establishing why I think we should learn differently, one of the first things that I want to point out to you is that learning differently and learning in itself is a transformational process. And that's why I guess the byline for this webinar today is very much that, you know, is that concept that learning activity that builds better people is what we're trying to do today. And it sounds a bit lofty and a little bit out there, but that's actually what I think learning is all about. Learning isn't a commodity. Learning isn't something that you pick up a few extra tools, you know, through and you have them on your belt and you go out and you just do different things, or you do things better. My firm belief is that really great learning, really high level learning, I want to make very clear what I'm talking about when I say high level learning. Really high level learning is a transformational thing. It actually turns you into something different. It turns you into something better. And that's for me a very exciting thing. So that's what I really want to work on today. The first thing I really need to do for everybody watching today, because I know that there were several people who registered for this webinar to be run in February, and here we are on the 16th of March running our webinar. And the first thing I want to do is say a very clear thank you to the people who were inconvenienced by the postponing of this webinar. For those of you who don't know, the reason that I didn't run the webinar last time was because my wife's mum was passing away, unfortunately, at about the time that we were looking to run the webinar. In fact, she passed away within a couple of days of the scheduled time, and I just had to be all in on family. I was nervous about that. I was nervous that that I was inconveniencing a lot of people and that perhaps I should just sort of step away and belt this webinar out. But I've been so heartened by the messages from people who were registered for the webinar and who weren't able to participate at that time, and people who understood and people who actually were reaffirming my decision for me. So thank you so sincerely for that. It means a huge amount to me that people would be so understanding, because I certainly would like to provide full respect to the time that you're putting aside to being in a webinar out of your busy schedule. So, okay, starting broad, what are we talking about when we're talking about learning differently? And I'm someone who has a really good look at what futurists, I guess, are saying around education, what they're saying around learning, what they're saying about its importance, what they're saying about the type of education that we need to be immersing ourselves in. One of the ones that I rate incredibly highly is this fellow Alvin Toffler, who points out to us that the illiterate of the 21st century won't be those who can't read and write, but it'll be the ones who can't learn new things effectively. It'll be the ones who can't unlearn some of the old things that are no longer relevant or no longer serving us, and then be able to say, okay, I don't just need to learn something new, I need to relearn my ways of learning, such that I can make sure that I'm going out there armed with what's relevant into the workplace. In fact, I would even go a step further from Toffler's theory here in saying that the illiterate of the 21st century, and I would change that to the employable of the 21st century. So when we look at the difference between what we needed to learn in the past compared to what we need to learn to be successful now, it's really about letting us know that the knowledge age, the information age, as we might put it sometimes, is pretty much over now. The imperative around creating or accessing information and knowledge is gone. And we know that because in the old days, knowledge was king, knowledge was power. And to be honest, we argued over the quality of what the knowledge that was very, very similar. So we had single sources for our knowledge. For me, it was often my dad. And if dad had no idea, then I went straight to the wall unit in mum and dad's lounge room and picked out the appropriate volume from our Funk and Wagnall's encyclopedia. And sometimes I would argue with kids at school about whether the Funk and Wagnall's was right compared to the Encyclopedia Britannica. But the truth is that it didn't matter. The difference between the two explanations for any particular topic that I might look up would be incredibly minute, to the point of being irrelevant. So these days, though, the job's different. We often still have the single source for information when we're looking for knowledge or facts, and that might these days be Google. The problem when you go to Google is you don't get a single response, as you did with Funk and Wagnall's or the Encyclopedia Britannica. You get thousands, if not millions, of responses. And in fact, the University of the Future have looked very carefully into what are the skills and the capacities that young people to be employable beyond around 2020, so not far away at all. They've looked into what they need to be employable, and one of the skills, and it's in fact their number one skill, is the idea of having a strong understanding of what they call cognitive load management, which, if I may speak colloquially, is a little bit the idea of saying that when you do a Google search and you get those millions of potential responses, it's not just saying, well, here's one that'll do. Cognitive load management is being able to manage a vast array of information and being able to just look through that list and kind of go, if you'll forgive me, bullshit, 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 that one, that's the one that I really need. So it's the ability to not just absorb information, but to be discriminatory about which is the information that I'm really going to need. So that requires a higher level of thinking. And that's why I guess even in the last webinar I unpacked a little bit here of Bloom's taxonomy. And this is, again, Benjamin Bloom was another educational theorist who I reckon even though he designed this back in the 50s and 60s and sort of released various incarnations of it, I really think it stands up incredibly well. Because what Bloom's encouraging us to do is to step out of those first couple of knowledge and comprehension rungs on his taxonomy and start to encourage ourselves to get higher. And the real problem with that is that when we run an educational experience in our businesses, the knowledge and comprehension stuff is kind of the stuff that's just easy to do. So we can build a PowerPoint that takes a certain chunk of information, and we can pull it together into some really naff slides, and we can put it up there, and we can say, great, now that I have put it on a wall and I've spoken to it, you have it. And that's great, but you don't necessarily do anything with that information. And in fact, the bottom couple of rungs of Bloom's taxonomy here, I would contend to you, are all about us. They're about what we want to do as the leaders of learning in our organisations. It's only when we get up to the top few and we step above that red level of application that we start to make it about them. And that means that we've actually really transformed our instructional mode. So when we're working in the bottom couple of rungs, we're in delivery mode. So we've got information and we would like you to have it, and we would like you to have a basic or preliminary understanding of that language. But when we get above that, we get into what I would call an action imperative or an implementation imperative, where we're actually setting up environments where people are compelled. There's an expectation that we hold them accountable to, that they actually do and create something with that. In fact, I think if you look at if you go into the detail of this slide here and have a look at some of the verbs that are in place, when you look at the verbs next to those top couple of rungs, and you're talking about design and invention, composition of new ways of doing things, predicting the way things might work out. I love the idea of assessing theories and evaluating outcomes and even rating potential ways of going about things. I think that's the level of thinking that we're looking for, and it's certainly the level of thinking that's going to drive improvement in a competitive marketplace. So what we're looking for, I guess, is not an environment where people attend. So I would contend that in knowledge and comprehension, what do the participants do in that situation? They attend, they show up. When they get up above that purple and red area, what we find is people at least listening. Now, the difference between listening and attending can be hard to discern sometimes. You can see someone in a workshop or in a facilitation who looks like they're listening, but the truth is all they're really doing is attending. They're just showing up. They're just filling a seat for us. So being clear on when people are actively listening is a worthy and a worthwhile thing to be looking for. And as you get a little bit higher, you find that the learning environment becomes noisy. It becomes incredibly busy because people are starting to talk about certain aspects of it. They're starting to question, they're starting to criticise. They really start to think deeply, and they think about ways that they can imagine contextualising the information that's coming to them. And then even better, they start doing stuff. They start to really get active with the things that they're learning, and they design solutions to problems, which is which is some of the outcome stuff that I think most people are looking for from the learning environment. So broadly, that's what we're trying to do today, is we're trying to encourage you as leaders of learning in your organisations to just step up and get yourself above the bottom couple of rungs of Bloom's taxonomy and start to do something really fantastic with what you're learning. So there's the broad. So I want to move towards the specific, but first of all, I do also want to point out that I've got a really strong determination today to go like the clappers and to force feed you if you would. No, this isn't a picture that I've taken myself recently. I did get this one from somewhere else. But this webinar today is very much about trying to hit you with as much information I can. You might feel like you're over-consuming. You might feel like there's too much information today. I want you to relax about that. First of all, I want to later on point out to you that I'm going to give you a couple of things that will allow you to make sense of this after the webinar today, so you won't necessarily have to, you won't necessarily have to just, have the 1 hour experience today, but you're going to have to also do a little bit of thinking afterwards. So this is stuff that I'm going to give you some resource that you'll be able to use, as well as give you some opportunities to step a little further with learning activity and how you can spread it outside of, I guess, your sphere of influence as well. So that's important to me, that you don't just have a 1 hour experience today, that the investment of your time goes beyond today. And I guess the other thing I want to do today is to make today, as much as I can, an interactive thing. So, the wonderful news for me is that I've already got some interactivity. I've got the wonderful Georgia Murch, who's on today, who's already put more of a comment than a question in the question box, and that's all good, Georgia. Thank you. It's great to have people who are stepping up, but I do really want you today to not make today an experience where you just attend, where you just sit there. and you don't listen, speak, think, or do. So step up, get involved. And if you do have a question today, I really want to encourage you to just chuck it in that question box. There's a couple of ways that you can get involved. One is to use that question box, and just by typing, you can get a question in there. I'm going to try and keep an eye on it. The question box, I'm going to be really honest about. I've got a couple of little prompts for myself here to remind myself to get stuck into that question box and to answer questions about how you might get going with this stuff. But at the same time, I sometimes won't get to it straight away. A good way to get to you straight away is to make sure that you put your hand up. So as a teacher, I love this little feature in GoToWebinar, which you'll see a little hand on your control panel there. And if you put your hand up, it's just like being in a classroom, classroom. If you put your hand up, I will know that you have something to ask. And what I can do from my end is unmute you. And we can have that conversation just like if we were actually in a classroom and wanting to talk about this stuff. So 2 ways that you can get involved there. And really want you to know that you can make those available to you. The other thing, I guess, is that if you're in the background today and you're having any sort of issue with accessing the webinar today, if there's a sound issue or if there's a problem of some sort, if you're getting there, then the other person on the webinar today is my awesome business manager, Chris. You can't hear Chris because she's got a terrible cough today, so we're not going to do that to her. But if you do have any issues and you're trying to access the webinar, she's a real tech guru and she's going to help you out if you've got any problems there as well. So thank you also, Ian, for jumping in there. I figured that whether you need to go to the bathroom or not is probably something that I'm going to defer to Chris. No, I'm all good. So if you feel like you need to slip out to go to the loo, yes, you can. You have full permission, and that goes for all of you. Just make sure that you take a buddy and you're back in 3 minutes. There's the teacher and you creeping in there. All right, so the next thing I want to do in the webinar today is I want to start to unpack for you what I think is the imperative around learning and stepping up to that higher level of learning, and it's the concept of learning together. Now, we over the last maybe 10 years or so, as the internet has really taken hold and impacted the way we've learned, we've gone towards a very personalised way of learning and also a very individualised way of learning. And what I mean, the way that's manifested is in what we call MOOCs. So that means the massive online open online courses that many universities are founding, and also many organisations are founding in competition of our universities. And what it means is you can personalise not only which courses you choose, but you can get accreditation for those, and you can also then, I guess, personalise your learning pathway within those courses and go to the stuff that you really need. The great advantage of learning online and then learning on your own is that you can stop the teacher. So there are many people today who I know have registered for this webinar who even sent me some apologies today saying, I can't make it, but I really want to see this webinar. So they're going to get the recording of the webinar today, and as other people who are in the room with us today. And the good part about the recording is that you can stop the teacher. So if I say something that you find somewhat mildly interesting, you might go, oh, hang on a sec, what did he say there again? I want to catch that again. And you can actually stop and rewind and go back and make sure that you get mastery over the particular concept we're talking about. And that really took off, and universities who were delivering still very much the traditional face-to-face model were feeling very much under threat from these MOOCs. And what we're finding now is that after people have had a significant period of time of having a crack at MOOCs, what they're finding is that the dropout rate in MOOCs is just as high, and if not higher in MOOCs than it is in the face-to-face mode. And we're going, what's that about? And what we think it's about is the absence of the personal touch. It's the absence of, one, the learning leader or the teacher who actually encourages you to keep going and provides the personal motivation to learn and to try things that are beyond your current capacity. And it's also the loneliness that presents from learning without some classmates, without some people who are working together. So I really love this photo, for instance. This is some Italian teachers who have gone to the trouble of changing the way that they meet and the way that they collaborate. And what you'll see in this photo is that there's the absence of some rather traditional constructs in the learning environment here. Number one is the absence of tables. So you can see that for a start. They're all gone, and the usual uncomfortable chairs have been replaced by some lovely armchairs. And what they're doing there is saying that let's get rid of some of those little barriers that make us emotional in some way about the learning environment, and let's just get comfy. because when we're comfortable, the limbic system of our brain switches off, the neocortex of our brain comes on, and we're able to use the full capacity of our thinking. And that's really exciting. But what happens when we, one of the other things that you'll notice that's missing from this photo is the absence of that learning leader. Everybody is on some sort of equal footing here. We've got and this idea of meeting or working in a circle isn't new, but people don't do it sometimes because they think that it's, we're trying to sort of build this namby-pamby sort of circle of trust going on here, and that's not what a circle does. The reason that circle works is because of the absence of powerful positions. What's interesting about that from my perspective in a learning environment is that when I work with young people and when even when I work in the adult learning environment, there's a very clear message by me being the one person in the room who's standing. And the message is about power. But it's because my job is to speak. I've determined that by standing, and your job is to listen, which is your job is to listen. And if you want to, you can slip even lower than that into just attending. And my job is through my power to control your behaviour. When that person's missing, what happens is we tend to mimic each other's behaviour rather than wait for the learning leader to tell us off and make eye contact with us. So it increases the level of both responsibility when we're working in a circle like this, just by changing the view, by changing the look of the way that our learning environment should be. And it also increases engagement. So I talked to those 4 verbs that I mentioned before of people listening, speaking, thinking and doing on Bloom's taxonomy. And when you look at this photo and ask ourselves if engagement is listening, speaking, thinking and doing, what's the percentage of these people who are listening, speaking, thinking or doing, which means they've gone above attendance. And it's pretty high. It's pretty high. And I think that what you can see here is more likely to be a picture that represents the notion of people problem solving, of people designing new solutions and comparing ideas rather than sitting and just summarising a few of the key points that the speaker is making. So what we're doing here is we're moving on from learning needing to be about the sage on the stage, about the guru with the slide deck, and we're saying, no, we're going to actually get together and we're going to learn together. And when we can personalise the way that we learn together, we get the benefits of both what MOOCs are on about, and we get the benefits of being able to learn in a highly motivated relational system. And when I suggest that, I guess, that idea of learning together, people start to immediately draw a sharp breath, because all of a sudden, oh no, he's advocating group work, which sounds awful. Well, actually, it doesn't sound awful for all of us. In fact, most of us, we tend to be pretty divided down the middle about group work. We either love it or we hate it. And we love it when we're in a highly productive and action-orientated team, and we hate it when we have to work with Barry, because Barry's a complete pain in the neck. So what we're saying here is that group work sounds all fantastic, but it's very circumstantial, and what it's dependent upon is personality for the way that it works. Now, for me, as leaders of learning, relying on hopefully people landing in groups where they will be harmonious as a result of personality is leaving way, way too much to chance. So, first little tip for you, whenever you are looking to get people together and have them work cooperatively, the optimum number for that is 4. So all the literature, all the research around cooperative learning points to the fact that if we go under or over 4, that certain behaviours will come over the top of that. That won't lend themselves to a high level of engagement and accountability. So 4 is the best number, and in fact I insist upon this when I'm running training, when I'm running workshops for both for the corporate sector and for schools. The little memo that comes through from me to the organiser of the function and the training is always that I want participants seated cafe style. Why do I like cafe style in groups of 4? Because cafes are noisy. Now, cafes are busy. Cafes are where people are completely engaged. You can't sit in a group of 4 and just sort of stare blankly out the window without anybody noticing you. So I love that dynamic of cafe style for the way that I'm going to set up a really strong cooperative learning environment, and then I leverage that as I go forward. The risk of not having of relying heavily on personality is that we have some personality types that creep in. The first one for me would be the hogs. Okay, so you will get people who go, fantastic group work, I love group work, it's my time to shine. So they hog not only all of the interesting components of the work, they hog the responsibility and the leadership within that group. And one of the things we mentioned before about working in a circle or in cafe style that's so beneficial is that we don't have somebody in that learning leader role. We actually want some level of equal participation here. I'll talk to that in just a moment as well. So the hogs just take over, and of course one of the things that they do is they take all the credit as well. So your hogs might be best represented by people who are both credit chasers and control freaks. And so what we're doing in that environment is we're encouraging old paradigms, old stereotypes to run rampant over the top of the way that we want people to actually work together. In this instance, when we're talking about who the hogs are, and I hate to say this and to speak ill of my own, but the blokes, we tend to be the hogs because we have decided that we are the ones by our power, and this isn't always the case, but through our power and our perceived seniority for some reason, that we need to be the ones who assign roles in the group, and we need the ones that takes charge, and we need to be the ones that establish hierarchy. And that what that does is it diminishes everybody else in the group. So we need to catch ourselves doing that, but also we need to create environments where it's not even possible for the hogs to achieve. Because if there's a hog, then for me risk number 2 is that there's going to be a log as well, which means there is somebody who's not only saying group work fantastic, my time to shine, there's someone who's saying group work fantastic, my time to do bugger all. And that's not good enough either. They slide quietly out the back, and if the hogs are credit chasers and control freaks, then the logs are arm folders and phone addicts. They'll go and grab their phone and secretly look at it under the table, because the truth is they're going to do as little as they possibly can. They love the idea of the knowledge and comprehension level that Bloom speaks to, because in that environment they get to just attend. They get their name written on the sheet that says, yes, we showed up, but we didn't actually do anything particularly useful. And that's not good enough. So, I know that myself, I experience this sometimes when I work with schools, and I'm actually become more comfortable calling it out, particularly when leaders become logs. That's not good enough. So when I run training for a school and the principal has called me in and asked me to run a workshop on something, but their work is so important that they don't stay for the workshop, I call them out on that. That's not good enough. That's logging it for me. That's stepping out of the way, because what they're looking for sometimes, our logs, is to stand on the stage and take the applause and to take credit for what's been provided without being able to, taking the imperative of actually getting involved. So what we're looking to do is to create environments that are absent of hogs and logs. Now, for me, the hogs and logs will always exist if we rely on personality to drive performance within the group. So I'm not like that. I'm saying I want to be hugely manipulative about the learning environment. I want to take full control and full responsibility of that learning environment, such that we can actually reimagine what it looks like and get a different level of performance from people. And to be honest, if you're looking for a different level of performance from people, you might as well test it out on the people that are the hardest to engage. So I love this photo. This photo for me says everything that I wanted to say about reimagining what learning activity should look like. And here, this is me working with a group of prep students in country Victoria, in a town called Mildura, and we're learning something that for me is a difficult thing to teach these kids, and that is about anger. And so you can see me drawing my picture there about what anger looks like in me, because to understand anger, and this is something that will resonate for the males in the room today, we don't intellectualise anger very well. We're not very good at transferring feelings into language, and this is why females who might have a male at home, you might, if that male comes home feeling angry and you can see it in them that they're angry, sitting down and eyeballing them and going, honey, tell me why you're angry, is not going to be a very productive response. In fact, what we're probably likely to get back is, I'm not angry, even though it's patently obvious we are, because we're just so poor at intellectualising it. We have to be able to understand and recognise anger physiologically in our bodies. And so what I've done here is start to draw myself as an angry person, and I'm asking the kids to make contributions for where they would see anger in my body if I got angry. So I'm asking and you can see the girl that's to my right in this picture. She's the one that's at the moment speaking and telling me what to do. But when I think about engagement in this picture, I think about, okay, if I took a snapshot, and in this case I actually have, what number of my students, or what percentage of my students are engaged? What percentage of them are listening, speaking, thinking, or doing? And the truth is, in this instance, I'm pretty confident that that percentage is very high. I'm not quite sure about the blonde-headed kid right down the bottom of this picture, but I think the percentage is quite high. Now, if you flip that to the traditional learning environment, and I'm standing at the front of the room with students sitting at individually assigned front-facing desks, and I tell them about anger and draw a picture of myself angry on the board, and I ask people to put their hand up and to contribute an idea, I think we probably know, first of all, who will put their hand up. It's the usual suspects. And so that means that there's plenty of opportunity for a few others who don't want to play this game to just log out the back. And the logs are probably the ones who need to know about anger the most, so we need to get them engaged. What's engaging us about this? What's engaging the students in this picture? I'd love to say that it's my brilliant practice and the things that I'm saying, but it's not. The truth is that what's engaging in this picture is that we're working together now. This isn't something that I'm doing for you. This isn't something that I'm doing to you. I'm not taking a powerful position in this group. We've taken an equal position, just like the Italian teachers. They're sitting in comfy chairs, and in this one we're lying on bellies, and we're working on something together. And that's a highly motivating thing, is to do something together. And as a result, the content and the learning that we're looking to have happen here is now reaching the students at a much higher level. So we've got to reimagine the way that we want our learning environments to look if we want to get a better output and a better level of engagement from our young people. So again, love this picture. Don't love it so much because it's telling me exactly what the train wreck is that is my hairline at the moment, but I do love it for the level of engagement that the students are demonstrating here. All right, so let's look into those, like I said before, those 4 principles of what makes a great cooperative learning environment. So the first one for me is that any learning environment that's truly cooperative needs to have a high level of interdependence. So what I mean by that is that we need each other to complete the task. So any task that we're going to do as a group has to be done in such a way that we actually cannot complete the task if there is a hog who is taking all of the work, and if there is a log who is doing none of the work. It actually can't get done unless there's input from everybody. You get 3 really great benefits when we talk to the idea of strong interdependence within a learning activity. One is that you get this amazing diversity of solutions when everybody's involved in looking at the same problem at the same time. It also reinforces the learning for people when they hear people speak about it in different ways. It reinforces it even further when we speak about it. And, and that old adage, I guess, that you don't really know it unless you can explain it to a 5-year-old. It was Einstein that said that. You don't understand it unless you can explain it to a 5-year-old, stands true, because what we actually know is that you learn a lot by being a learner, but you learn even more by having to teach it and having to explain it to other people. So if you've got a component of this over which you're taking charge, or you have some sort of expertise, explaining it to other people in terms that will allow them to access that, and being required to do that is a really important factor. And the other thing that happens when you create this interdependence is that it actually drives motivation, because we genuinely feel, we don't fake it. We don't fake by, we don't have to go through that awful feeling of sort of standing up at the end and being applauded by people. The truth is they're just applauding the hog because that person did all the work. We don't have to do that because we know that we contributed because of the interdependence that was at play. So we get this sense of shared achievement, which is highly motivating for people, and they feel like stepping back into that learning environment again. The second principle is accountability, which means what we're talking about here is that each person in the group is responsible for a certain piece of action. Now that can be the same kind of action, but it can also be different actions, which means that we can have diverse groups where people have different roles. It's just that we're not going to assign them by hierarchy and power. We're going to assign them, collectively as a group. So it means that I can't log it because nobody else has been assigned my role. So if I get a role in my group and it's my job to do this and your job to do that, then what happens is that I sort of can't back out and hope that someone picks up the slack because they're doing something different to me. So a high level of accountability in cooperative learning is incredibly important. The next one is what I call work, think, sharing, which is, I guess, where we start to get really clear and explicit about division of labour. What I mean by that is that we want to have a high level or a really close level of equal participation to our groups. And what happens there is that people's contribution this goes very, very deeply to the human element of working in a group and working successfully in a group, because the contribution that people make gets recognised when we all have to contribute something, when we all contribute something equally. We feel when some people are doing more than others, it establishes an informal hierarchy, which makes it hard for people to thank people and congratulate people really sincerely. And what we know about the opportunity to thank and congratulate people is that's what builds trust. So we can't force people or tell people to trust within a team. The way that people trust people in a team is when people do their job, and you can trust that they will go about their work in a diligent way. Why do they feel like going about their work in a diligent way? Because when they do, people thank and congratulate them for it. They get recognised for it, which is really exciting, I reckon. And then the last one that's hugely important is the notion of having simultaneous interaction. I just cannot stand the whole group work mentality that has us put people in groups and then have one person does this, and while they do that, the three people, other people are waiting for them to finish that so that they can add their part to it. And I just think that that's absolute nonsense. Any strong cooperative learning activity will have the notion of simultaneous interaction embedded deeply within it. Because taking turns or waiting, any time that there's idle and wait time in a group activity, just absolutely kills engagement. It just absolutely kills it. And this is where sometimes what I've mentioned and advocated earlier today is about having circles as a great way of working together. But circles could be a real killer if you're doing them the wrong way. Because I don't know about you, but I can't stand that whole thing where everybody gets together in a circle and then we just go all the way around the circle while people tell us who they are and where they're from and what's your biggest work challenge at the moment. Because to be honest, the only person engaged is the person speaking. The engagement of the person, if I'm facilitating that group and we go all the way around the circle, as a facilitator, I might defer to the person on the right first. What I can guarantee is the engagement of the person on the left is just about at zero. And what I can also guarantee is that once the person on the right has finished speaking, that their engagement will be about zero. So there's just a really low and really deplorable level of engagement when nobody's listening. And so big circles where we go all the way around is no good, because what we need in a strong cooperative learning environment is people who are all in all the time. So we want people who are active and are participants in the learning for all of the time that's available. So just realising here, guys, that I've done in my slide setup here, I've called all 4 principles Principle 1, so apologies for that. A good learning leader will also be able to admit when something has gone just slightly awry. So look, I want to, like I said, I've got working today from the broad to the specific. I want to make sure that we don't finish today's webinar without walking you through just a handful, 5's a handful, just a handful of strategies that you might like to deploy. And this is where sometimes I embarrass myself a little bit, because I've talked about some rather high-level intellectual kind of stuff, establishing my why and establishing why it's incredibly important for people to learn at a new level. But then I go, you know what, the ways that you get it going are just ridiculously simple to the point of being almost childlike. And to be honest, if we're going to learn about learning, we might as well go and have a look at where children are doing great learning, and where schools have a really strong commitment to cooperative learning structures is where some of them are really getting some awesome output. So let's walk you through 5. The first one I've mentioned there is talking chips. I'm going to admit that talking chips is probably my favourite cooperative learning structure. When I'm running a talking chips activity, I put enough chips on a table for everybody to have 3 chips, and then I give them a topic to talk about. Now, when I'm getting a group ready for this, I will often give them a little training run, and I'll ask them to discuss something incredibly benign, non-related to work, because I don't want any of the work emotion to come over the top here. The structure is what's important here, because it eliminates that personal limbic responses coming across the group. So what I'll do is give them a topic that's easy to talk about. I might ask them to talk about what are the elements of a great pizza, and then I throw anybody out who suggests that pineapple should be on a pizza. Right up there with some of our world leaders on that issue at the moment. And then I'll transfer them or scaffold them into a higher level of engagement by giving them a more challenging topic to talk about. So it might be a topic, for instance, like discuss the elements of a truly cohesive team and what that looks like behaviourally for us. And you get some really fantastic responses. Now, talking chips is such that you don't have to take turns here. I can't stand taking turns. When you're talking chips, what you do is if you've got something to offer to the group, if you've got one sentence to say, you just throw a chip in when you say it. You don't have to wait for the person next to you to say something after it. You could contribute 2 or even 3 sentences in a row. But the rule is, once you have committed your 3 chips, I think the best way to put it is to just put it bluntly, shut up. and you have to wait until the other people in the group have committed their 3 chips before you can take your 3 chips back and start again. Now, if you run my 4 principles of cooperative learning across the top of that, is there a level of interdependence? Do we all need to contribute to make this work? Yep, we do. Is there a level of accountability? So is it incumbent upon every single person there to step up and get involved? Yes, it is. Number 3, is it about work, think, sharing? Do those ideas get shared such that people are there's an equal division of labour? Well, the structure actually determines there's a perfectly equal division of labour here. And also, that last one, is there a high level of simultaneous interaction, or do I have to wait for my turn? No, you don't. You can jump in first if you want, and the only time you wait is if you've already had your share. So I love the way that Talking Chips so explicitly demonstrates those 4 key principles that must exist within a great cooperative learning activity. Now, I would contend to you that Talking Chips is something that you could take to your next team meeting without a problem in the world. And what we might do is that we might find people who are handing in their chips straight away and running out of chips very quickly are probably the people who were the hogs when you kept the learning activity nice and loose. So the next activity there that's worth a try is what is called One Stray. I love the One Stray for the way that it actually has us deprivatising thinking and learning. So what I mean by deprivatising is that I think that a great amount of research is often done by looking over the back fence at what other people are doing and stealing that, putting our own angle on it. And I think that's actually quite an effective way to do research. So I like the idea of great learning being 90% theft. So for me, what I do when I run One Stray is that I get a group to start talking about a topic. I may even use Talking Chips with it, but I nominate one person in the group to be the stray. They're not allowed to speak. The stray has to stand up and it has to go to all the other tables in the group and just steal stuff. Just take their really good ideas. When they return to the table, I don't let the group that's existing at the table then take over and talk to the stray. The stray's done enough listening. At this point, everybody else has to shut up and the stray releases to the group what it is that they found out. Great way to get cross-fertilisation of ideas in a room of people where you're looking for them to step up to the very top levels of blooms and create something really fantastic. The next one's All Right. So All Right is a strategy that you might use where you have one piece of paper for a group, you give them an important topic, and in All Right what happens is that people will, the person with the piece of paper sits there and just listens to the topic, and you're not allowed to speak while you've got the piece of paper, but as soon as something incredibly important or pertinent has been said, they have to write that line down on the piece of paper and they pass it to the person on the right. And what we find is it's a great cooperative learning structure for synthesising or prioritising the work that we're trying to do. And I don't know about you, but you may have worked in that group before that gets sidetracked very easily. And having a way and a system within a group of saying, no, let's get back to the point, let's find the important stuff. Now, leverage is a little bit of competitive competition here as well, because people often tend to look over their shoulder at the next group and say, man, I've already got 4 or 5 lines here. Come on, move the papers. We need to get on task. We need to say, get to the point of what we're talking about here. The next one's 4 corners. I love setting up 4 corners. I've done it myself as a school principal. I've used 4 corners before, where what I've done is say, okay, we want to improve parent communication in our school, but we can't spend all our time communicating with parents. So what I want to know is which of these 4 strategies are going to give the greatest bang for our buck. And so what I'll do is put a strategy that I have thought about in each corner of the room. I point people to those at the start of it. I ask them to sit and to write notes for 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a great period of time for people to do some initial brainstorming for themselves, and I insist on silence at that time. And then I ask them to get up and go to the one that they think has the best chance of giving us a great return on investment. And but I also ask them to talk about it then. Once the silence is over, we've got to get noisy. So people cross-fertilise ideas, they start to move, they go to one corner and then they'll hear some explanations from other people while the debate becomes quite open, and they might move from one corner to the other. And I usually end up picking the strategy where the most people are by the end of a nice, broad, robust conversation. And then the last one, I love the mixed pair share one. One, because in a learning environment, inactivity is a real killer, particularly for the males in the room. I don't know about you, but for me, Ian, I'm suggesting that potentially you put your hand up because you'd like to go to the toilet, not because you need to go to the toilet, but because you're trying to break up the learning environment. Sometimes I know that myself in a really boring presentation, I've been tempted to just go for a wander, not because I'm pretty much pretending to go to the toilet, because I'm trying to break break it up with activity to be able to engage for a longer period of time. So my contention is that having a structure like mixed pair share, where again what you do is you give people 4 minutes to come up with a potential solution to a problem. Give them some information, prime them, get them in a strong headspace, get them up to the top of Bloom's taxonomy. Now say do something with this. I want you to devise a solution to a potential problem in your area of responsibility at the moment, and then get up. And so I have people walk randomly around the room with a bit of music on, a little bit of musical chairs theory in this one, and I get people to stop, and when the music stops, you chuck a high five to the person you're next to, you pitch your idea, and you get some feedback from them. And it's a great way to get feedback from people who perhaps you wouldn't normally get feedback from because perhaps you're not sitting at their table. So it's a great way to get ideas spread around the room, a great way to get feedback on your ideas. Because I know that for me, sometimes I've thought up a fantastic idea and made a point of something that I'd like to do. I've deployed it and then found out later that some other people had just a little turn on that, just a little switch, a little quirk on that would have made it exponentially more effective, and it would have been good to find that out before I had to learn via trial and error. So they're the 5 things that I reckon that big idea of get up to the top of Bloom's taxonomy, really think heavily, think hard, make sure you're solving problems. They're the things that I reckon we're aiming for. But what's amazing is that sometimes just some poker chips is all you need to be able to start to get those things to happen. So look, I will wind up around here, okay, reminding you again that I am keeping an eye on that question box. If there is anything you want to ask, then please feel free to whack that in there. I want to also remind you that if you have a look, there's a handout section, and what I've done for today is I want you to have a little prezi from today, so that if you go into the handout section on your control panel today, you will be able to download the slides that I've used in front of you today. More than happy for you to take them away, ponder on them, take some notes. Hopefully they can be of use to you as you go forward. I do want you to be able to have the benefits of coming online to do some learning today, of not needing to spend your time getting a cramp in your hand taking copious notes, but I want you to be able to go and reflect on exactly what you've been looking at this whole time. So feel free, download those. If you think that you would like to go a little bit further with this idea of improving performance through learning, all you need to do in that question box is just write the word chat. We'll just have a chat. And what I want you to know is the things that are available to you are workshops around the way that we can learn more effectively. I do a lot of keynote speaking in this space too. Do some coaching for people as well that are in charge of HR and learning and development, and making sure that they're able to bring this into their work slowly and they're supported to do that. We can do training. We also have some long-term partnership work that we do where, for instance, you might have a lot of content, a lot of change that needs to be managed, and what we want to do is bring that to people in a way that they engage with it at a really high level so that they're not completely freaked out with it and make all sorts of mistakes while the change process is on. So if you think that you might be interested in that, then please feel free to just whack that word chat in and we'll make that happen. Hey, we are going to run another webinar. Like I said, this is a series, and I want you to be aware of that, on Thursday the 20th of April, 2 p.m. at this time again. The link for you to be able to register for that webinar will be in our follow-up email. That follow-up email will also have the link to the recording of this webinar today. So if you do want to get that opportunity to shut the teacher up for a minute while you make sense of things, rewind and hear it again, you have full access to being able to do that. And the next webinar we're going to do is about learning relationships. So what we've done is we think that when it comes to learning being, as I mentioned in the last webinar, the last frontier of competitive advantage, we think there are 3 components to that. And the first one is what you've looked at today, which is learning activity and just getting started with that activity. The second one is learning relationships. And this is about creating an environment that generates some of the affect and some of the positive motivating feeling that comes along when you're in the presence of, I guess, your favourite teacher. So I often think back to the teachers that I had, and the ones that had the greatest effect on me tended to be the ones that, if we can speak again very plainly about this, I would describe most of them as being firm and fair. What they weren't was all firm or all fair. They knew how to do both, and they knew how to deploy that behaviourally when they were working as the leaders of a learning environment, which is what a classroom is. Now, I think that when we're looking to create a strong, cooperative, collaborative learning culture around our communities and to have that exponential benefit of really high-level thinking starting to generate ideas in your team and in your business, I think that doesn't happen unless we have people who are leading through learning. So put bluntly, learning relationships, this webinar is going to be about how to lead like the world's greatest teacher. And what are the behaviours that you will need to deploy, and how will you need to reflect on your work to know that you're always operating with as much level of consistency as you can in the most productive space. So that's what that webinar is going to be all about. Really, really looking forward to having you involved in that one. So look, I'll finish up there, guys. Again, while I'm sort of talking through this very, very last slide, if you do have any questions or you want to whack your hand up, go bananas. If you would like to get in touch, then there's a number there, the 1300 789 422, where you can get hold of us. You can get in touch with me personally. My personal email's there. And if you have more of a generic question about Real Learners, then there's the email address and the website for Real Learners there as well. But I want you to make sure that before the webinar ends, guys, that you do jump in and download those slides from the handout section. I thank you so much. Really thank you. Really appreciate so many of you registering for this one. We had about double the registrations for this one that we had for the last one. So it feels like we're starting to hit a mark that people are looking for information here, and people are starting to understand that it's not just about what we do in our businesses, it's not just about what we deliver, but how we deliver it is where that transformational stuff really comes in, and we get we get better people. We get better people when we create an environment where they're able to do the lifelong learning that I reckon we're built for. So thanks so much, guys. I'll let you go on that note. Have a wonderful Friday tomorrow and an even better weekend, and we'll see you in April for learning relationships. Okay, catch you then.